Hello, so in this class, we'll do geometry, chapter 1, conditional statements. Okay, so we'll go over some core concept and the definitions here, which are very important. So conditional statement is a statement that has two parts and a hypothesis P and the conclusion Q. Okay, so when the condition statement is in if-then form, then if part contains hypothesis P, okay, and then part contains conclusion Q. Okay, so it has two parts. One is a hypothesis P and conclusion Q. So in if and then form, if part contains hypothesis and then part contains the conclusion. So let's do some problems and then it will be more clear. So if a polygon is a pentagon, then it has 5 sides. So given the conditional statement, we have to underline the hypothesis and circle the conclusion. And we know in if-then form, if part contains the hypothesis and then part contains the conclusion. Okay, so we'll do it with green color maybe. So underline the hypothesis. So hypothesis is a polygon is a pentagon, and circle the conclusion. So conclusion is it has 5 sides. Okay, because if part contains hypothesis and then part contains the conclusion, and we have to underline the hypothesis. Now if two lines form vertical angles, then they intersect. So again we have to underline the hypothesis, which is if, and they intersect is the conclusion. So we have to circle they intersect. Okay, so if part contains hypothesis and then part contains the conclusion. Now let's do the next topic. So now in question 7 and 8, we have to write a conditional statement in if and then form. We have to rewrite these statements in a conditional statement in if then form. So 9x plus 5 is equal to 23 because x is 2. So how we'll write in if then form? If x is equal to 2, then 9x plus 5 is 23. Okay. Now second, today is Friday and tomorrow is the weekend. So we'll write if today is Friday, okay, then tomorrow is the weekend. Okay. So let's do more problems. So now another definition is negation. So negation is basically opposite of the original statement, like not P. And this is the symbol of negation. Like sky is blue, and we can say sky is not blue. So this is the negation this is the negation symbol. Okay. Now the conditional statements. So first statement is like if P, then Q. Okay. So when we write if P, then Q, symbol is P arrow Q. Okay. And P is the hypothesis and Q is the conclusion. Now, if we have to write converse of this was a conditional statement. First, this was, and if we have to write converse of this, then we exchange hypothesis and the conclusion. So if Q, then P, we exchange the hypothesis and conclusion. So this becomes Q arrow P. Now in inverse, we negate both the hypothesis and the conclusion in the conditional statement. So this was our conditional statement. If P can, then Q. In inverse, we negate that. So if not P, then not Q. And this is the symbol, not P, then not Q. If not P, then not Q. Okay. And in contrapositive, what we do is we write the converse and negate both. So we write the converse was this. Okay. We write the converse and then negate both. If not Q, then not P. So symbol is if not Q, then not P. Okay. So let's do one question and then it will be more clear. So another thing is that a conditional statement, this conditional statement and this contrapositive, they both are either both true or both false. Okay. Same way, converse and inverse are either both true or both false. And when both, if any statements, conditional statements, they are both true and both false, then they are known as equivalent statements. When the statements are either both true or both false, those statements are known as equivalent statements. So let's do a question. So this is a question given. Let P is given as two angles are supplementary, which is hypothesis, and the conclusion is the measure of the angles sum to 180 degree. Now we have to write its conclusion, its conditional statement, converse, inverse, and contrapositive. Okay. So P is given and Q is given. So let's write conditional statement. So what will be the conditional statement? If we go back here, conditional statement is this. If P, then Q, and P arrow Q. So let's write the conditional statement for this. So the conditional statement is if P, then Q. Okay. So here it would be if two angles are supplementary, then the measure of the angle sum to 180 degree. Okay. So now let's write converse. So what is converse? Converse is if Q, then P. So the converse statement here is if the measure of two angles sum to 180 degree, then the two angles are supplementary. Okay. So we wrote if Q, then P. Okay. This was P and this was Q. Okay. So now it is if Q and then P, which is the definition we wrote here. If Q, then P, and symbol is QP. Okay. Now let's write, this was converse. Let's write inverse, where we write conditional statement and then we negate P and then negate Q like this. Okay. So let's write inverse. So for inverse, what we do is we write this conditional statement if two angles, and we negate P and negate Q like this. So if not P, then not Q. So if two angles are not supplementary, then their measures do not sum to 180°. Okay. Now let's write contrapositive. So in contrapositive, what we do is we write converse. Okay. And then we negate it. Okay, so let's write that it is, so contrapositive is if not Q, then not P. So basically we write this converse statement and then we negate it. So if the measures of two angles do not sum to 180°, then they are not supplementary. Now let's see if they are true, which statements are true and false. And so see, if two angles are supplementary, then the measure of the angles sum to 180°. This is true. Okay. Then converse, if the measure of two angles sum to 180°, then the two angles are supplementary. So this is also true. Okay. And if two angles are not supplementary, then their measures do not sum to 180°. Here for inverse, that is also true. And if the measures, now let's see the contrapositive. If the measures of the two angles do not sum to 180°, then they are not supplementary. This is also true. Okay, so we'll see when some of these may not be uh, true or false, but in this case, all are true. Okay, so we know conditional statement and a contrapositive, they are either both are true or both are false. Okay, and converse and inverse, they are also either both true or both false. Okay, so this is the way we write conditional, converse, conditional statement, converse statement, inverse, and contrapositive when P and Q are given. Okay, we'll practice more in the next class, but please look at the other questions given in the book and try yourself, and feel free to let me know if you need help with any question. Okay, thanks for joining.